Hey guys, I'm going to bring you some very important information regarding a couple of patents that I've researched. I didn't find these. A couple of my subscribers had directed me in the direction to find these patents. I have read them and researched them. I'm not going to discuss all of them in depth. There's not enough time. I have another report that I've got to get out. The patent numbers are U.S. Patent 3951134. Distant brain reading and brain wave manipulation. The other patent, which I am going to discuss in a little bit of detail with you, is patent number 6011991, remote brain computer interface neural monitoring. And this all goes into context with the global neural net that I've been reporting on, and the JADE 2 software that sits on top of it. So this goes to GeoINT and JADE 2. Here we go. Patent number 6011991, remote brain computer interface neural monitoring. Abstract: a system and method for enabling human beings to communicate by way of their monitored brain activity. This is artificial telepathy. Moving on, the brain activity of an individual is monitored and transmitted to a remote location by satellite. At the remote location, the monitored brain activity is compared with pre-recorded normalized brain activity curves, waveforms, or patterns to determine if a match or substantial match is found. Now, I can see this going to the edging of the human nodes on the network, as well as going to the ABI data being collected. Going to thought-based activity for mapping and mastering the human domain. Moving on. If such a match is found, then the computer at the remote location determines that the individual was attempting to communicate a word, phrase, or thought corresponding to the match stored in the normalized signal. Now, if this technology is employed in GeoINT, you won't even have the privacy of your own thoughts. Again, I don't think this technology was funded, developed, and patented for government and military use to sit on a shelf somewhere collecting dust. Moving on. Description. This invention relates to a system and method for enabling human beings to communicate with one another by monitoring brain activity. In particular, this invention relates to such a system and method where brain activity of a particular individual is monitored and transmitted in a wireless manner, i.e. via satellite, from the location of the individual to a remote location so that the brain activity can be computer analyzed at the remote location, thereby enabling the computer and/or individuals at the remote location to determine what the monitored individual was thinking or wishing to communicate. In certain embodiments, this invention relates to the analysis of brain waves or brain activity and/or to the remote firing of select brain nodes in order to produce a predetermined effect on the individual. Now, this is remote mind control. MKUltra, directed not necessarily by human handlers, but by a computer system that sits on a global information grid in a network-centric environment. They can not only monitor your thoughts, but they can modify your behavior remotely. Moving on. Summary of the invention. Generally speaking, this invention fulfills the above described needs in the art by providing a method of communicating comprising the steps of, and here are the 9 steps that will be employed. Number 1, providing a first human being at a first location. This would be the equivalent of your patient 0 or target node on the network. Number 2, providing a computer at a second location that is remote from the first location. This would be the GeoINT AI system on the global information grid, or in a more localized aspect, the JADE 2 software. Number 3, providing a satellite. This would be the space component of the domain of the global information grid. Number 4, providing at least one sensor, preferably a plurality, or tens, hundreds, or thousands, with each sensor monitoring the firing of one or more brain nodes or synapses in the identified individual or individuals. Now, this ties into the remote nanosensing devices discussed in the previous GeoINT symposiums and papers. Number 5, detecting brain activity of the first human being using at least one sensor and transmitting the detected brain activity to the satellite as a signal, including brain activity information. Now, once you're a human node on a geospatial intelligence network with a unique bio API or network identifier, this is a piece of cake for these psychopaths. Number 6, the satellite then sending the signal, including the brain activity information, to the second location, or in other words, down to the global information grid for processing. Number 7, a receiver at the second location receiving the signal from the satellite and forwarding the brain activity information in the signal to the computer. Now, remember we discussed how the HTA tool and the AI programs being developed for identifying the signal in the noise? This brain mapping technology goes to that aspect of GeoINT. Number 8, comparing the received brain activity information of the first human being with normalized or average brain activity information relating to the first human being from memory. And this goes to the mapping of the individual nodes for normalcy patterns from a telepathic ABI standpoint by way of mapping the human brain activity, casting a neural net over humanity. Number 9, determining whether the first human being was attempting to communicate particular words, phrases, or thoughts based upon the comparing of the received brain activity information to the information from memory. Now, if it can distinguish reminiscing thought from present time, space, activity, communication of words, phrases, or thoughts, this technology can, in essence, determine intent before an action is executed by the first human being. Now, I want you to imagine the massive implications of this technology layered on an AI core on the GeoINT network system. Now, moving on here, in certain embodiments, the invention includes the following step. Pay attention. Asking the first human being a plurality of questions and recording brain activity of the first human being's response. The plurality of questions in the process of developing said normalized or average brain activity information relating to the first human stored in the memory. A database in a memory may include for each of the plurality 100 or 1,000 of individuals, a number of pre-recorded files that correspond to a particular thought, attempt to communicate a word, attempt to communicate a phrase or thought, or a mental state. Now, this goes to the JADE 2 and the GeoINT's ability to detect and read emotions. Moving on. Measured brain activity of a given individual may be compared to files from that database of that individual to determine what the individual is attempting to communicate or what type of mental state the individual is in. Now, this capability we discussed within the GeoINT context, and it goes to answering questions before they're asked. In certain embodiments, the plurality of questions are the same question. In certain embodiments, the plurality of the questions are different questions. Now, both of these statements absolutely go to the dichotomy we discussed particularly in depth in my episode 309 with John B. Wells in Caravan to Midnight regarding data neutrality and sequence neutrality. Moving on. In certain embodiments, the invention includes the step of normalizing or averaging recorded brain activity responsive to a given question or set of questions in developing the normalized or average brain activity information relating to the first human being. It is the object of this invention to enable brain activity of the first human being to be monitored, with the activity being transmitted to a remote location so that individuals and or a computer at the remote location can determine what the first human being was thinking or intending to communicate. In such a manner, human beings can communicate with one another via monitoring of brain activity and transmission of the same. Now, in the grand scope of things, this is not synthetic telepathy for humans to communicate with other humans. This is the ability to read or map brain functions and send that information to a machine for processing and interpretation for an actionable response by the AI system. Next, it is another object of this invention to communicate monitored brain activity from one location to another in a wireless manner, such as RF, IR, satellite, microwave, electromagnetic, etc. So, in other words, over the domain of land, air, and space. It is another object of this invention to provide a system capable of identifying particular nodes in an individual's brain, the firing of which affect characteristics such as appetite, hunger, thirst, communication skills, thought processes, depression, and the like. When such nodes are identified, they may be specifically monitored by one or more sensors to analyze behavior or communicate words, phrases, thoughts. In other embodiments, devices mounted to the person, such as underneath the scalp or via a microchip, may be energized in a predetermined manner or sequence to remotely cause particular identified brain nodes to be fired in order to cause predetermined feelings or reactions in the individual, such as a lack of hunger, lack of depression, lack of thirst, lack of aggression, lack of Alzheimer's disease symptoms, or the like. Now, the devices mounted to the person can be wetware or wearable tech. The remotely transmitted neural stimulation can also trigger the exact opposite of the predetermined feelings and reactions mentioned. It can trigger fear, depression, aggression, anxiety. How about pain? That has serious implications stemming from the complete blocking of or the inducement of this sensation remotely. Moving on. Brain node firings are the basis of thought and mind processes of individuals. Certain embodiments of this invention enable such brain firings and behavior to be captured by an external device. It is the object of this invention to utilize normalization or normalizing curves or waveforms or patterns based upon monitored brain activity to detect or determine thought process by the monitored individual. In such a manner, individuals can transmit by satellite what they are thinking or intending to think via their monitored brain activity without the need to talk or write down information. Now, where this goes to individuals can transmit by satellite, no, they're tapping your brain. That's what they're doing. You're going to be completely unaware this is being done to you. Moving on, each individual has a distinct pattern of brain node firings or brain activity. Each person is believed to be different in this regard. Thus, a separate brain activity file may be stored in a memory for each individual and analyzed or compared to received brain activity from the monitored individual in order to determine what that person was attempting or thinking about attempting to communicate. Now, this also goes to creating a unique bioidentifier for each human node on the network based on their individual unique brain activity signature. This also goes to cataloging and establishing norms based on an individual's brain activity, in addition to the mind reading capability identified here. Moving on. It is the object of this invention to utilize brain monitoring and transmission of monitored brain activity for lie detection and/or human communication. Now, in my video report entitled GeoINT, Casting a Neural Net on Humanity and the History of JADE, Planetary Conquest by a Global AI Warfare System, I explained how this AI technology would be able to read if a person's telling the truth or lying by the interpretation of body language, voice intonations, and facial expression, and then make a determination for a course of action. This technology takes that to a whole new level. Moving on. At least one sensor on the scalp or skin in certain embodiments provides signals representative of psychological activity generated in the brain of a monitored individual or individuals. A data acquisition device receives the signals representative of the psychological activity generated in the monitored brain and transforms the signals into a pattern or a curve corresponding to the monitored brain activity. This is then transmitted to a computer located at a remote location with the monitored brain activity pattern or curve stored in a memory at that remote location. The computer then causes the received pattern or curve information to be compared with stored brain activity pattern information relating to the monitored individual in order to determine A, whether the monitored individual is lying in response to a particular question, or B, what that monitored individual is communicating or attempting to communicate. Now, they have the capability now with the Global Information Grid in conjunction with GeoINT to reduce humanity to the sum total of the data collected on each human network node. Not only that, your every activity, transaction, physical or virtual communication, and yes, even your innermost personal thoughts will be cataloged and uploaded to a Hive-based AI system on the Global Information Grid. Okay, moving on. In certain embodiments of this invention, the computer located at the remote location includes a neural network suitably programmed in accordance with known neural network techniques for the purpose of receiving the monitored brain activity signals, transforming the signals into useful forms, training and testing the neural network to distinguish particular forms and patterns of psychological activity generated in the brain of the monitored individuals, and or comparing the received monitored brain activity information with stored information relating to that individual in order to determine what the individual is attempting to communicate. And again, this goes to the already known capabilities of the JADE system and GeoINT and expands on those capabilities using remote command and control aspects of MKUltra. Moving on, this invention further fulfills the above described needs by the art providing a method of affecting a mental or psychological state of an individual. The method comprising of the following steps. Number 1, providing at least one firing device capable of being energized on an individual. Number 2, energizing the firing device to cause the firing device to cause a particular or group of brain nodes to be fired in the individual in order to affect the mental or psychological state of that individual. And again, this device being referred to can either be wetware, something implanted, or wearable tech, or even a directed signal transmission in the form of RF, FM, microwave, ELF, or electromagnetic. Number 3, in certain embodiments, the method including the step of providing at least one firing device on or under the scalp of the individual in proximity of the brain of the individual. Number 4, in certain embodiments, the method including the step of identifying at least one brain node related to the mental or psychological state intended to be affected, targeting the individual's brain nodes and energizing the firing device or devices to cause the identified node to be fired in order to affect a particular mental or psychological state of that individual. Now, this is among other diabolical applications. Remote behavior modification can be accomplished prior to the perceived behavior being acted out by the targeted individual or individuals. Number 5, in certain embodiments, the method is utilized to cause the individual to be one of less hungry, less thirsty, less anxious, or less depressed, and so on. Or, in other words, as I previously pointed out, it can be used to cause the exact opposite. To what end is served by making a person or a population who are starving feel not hungry, or a population in a region with no access to water to feel not thirsty? The proponents of global dominance, the proponents of one world order, the proponents of mastering the human domain and the technology that will be used to accomplish this agenda are not benevolent. My question is, will this technology be used to euthanize individuals that are suffering, or entire population-centric regions? I don't know the answer, but we can all speculate. But one thing is for sure, this technology has the capability to identify, target, and eliminate people on many levels. Number 6, in certain embodiments, the remote node firing devices are electrically energized and generate electromagnetic waves which cause a plurality of brain nodes to be fired. Now again, one thing we know for certain, we are bioelectrical in nature. We are frequency-based beings, and the disruption, interference, or manipulation of these frequencies can have devastating and dire effects on us. Now, in closing, I want to also just mention 2 other patents that my attention was drawn to, and I'm going to leave links for this in the description box below. And both of these other patents are devices for implementing RF hearing effects, or in other words, hearing voices in your head, where they can implant thoughts, even memories, and voices into an individual or targeted individual's minds. That's all I've got for now. I've got to run. I've got to get some other information out to you guys. Please go to the links, review these patents, share this information, and get it out there. Time is running out.